My name's Geoffrey Michael, and I'm the fashion designer at Geoffrey Michael, and I've developed it over the last few years and built the brand myself. And I also do costume design, and I trained as an architect.
Okay, brilliant. Can you tell us about what you do on a day-to-day life and how you got to this job where you are at the moment?
Oh, goodness. Well, I started out by moving from Canada because I'm Canadian. I moved to where the hub of fashion was, which was in Paris, and I went very quickly to London just because of the language barrier. I sort of started out by just doing things freelance and starting to get in with the fashion crowd and just offering to do really anything that kind of related to lighting and architecture. And some of my first projects were sort of lit up, sort of sculptural designs. And I just so happened to be at the right place at the right time. I went out mingling at a certain party. Actually, it was at Machine A. And there were just people there that were really accepting and kind of moved me along to the next party, which led me immediately to doing costume design for U2, the band. And after that, people just assumed that I was a celebrity costume designer, and I really just went with it because I didn't realize that people could actually have that job. And so it sort of married all of my talents together, and I loved working with people, and I loved working with specifics and costume design, and I loved building sort of like with my hands in technology, and it was just everything. So I started doing light up shoes, and I patented those. And then from there, I did some work with the Pussycat Dolls, and then I did sort of bigger projects, and it just kind of spiraled out from there. And then about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I took some of my designs to Kiev, and I showed at Mercedes-Benz Kiev Fashion Days there. And I had advice from the former editor of Russian Vogue, and she was sitting there, and it was so surreal because we were all just around a table because it's a smaller event compared to London Fashion Week. And I said to her, well, this is a rare opportunity. Maybe I could just ask you some questions. And she's like, sure, I'm intoxicated. Why not? And I just said, what do you think I should do with my life? Like, should I go fully into fashion? Should I, take that leap? Because it's a big leap. I didn't train as a designer. And she said something like, Jeffrey, I think if you ever went to school, it could ruin the talent that you really have, which is understanding space and like, these concepts that you've built in your head. And I was like, okay, well, this is good advice coming from someone who knows what they're talking about. And so I did that, and then I started my first show, and I built that up for about a year because I really wanted to do something different. And I sort of did showpieces, and I did sort of a collection that was more, exciting press pieces. And then I did my first show last season, which was on a main catwalk, and it was off schedule, but it was amazing, and it was like sort of like my dream. And then just recently the stuff got put onto Vogue with that, and so I had my first sort of Vogue moment, and that was an aha moment. And I guess just recently now I'm starting to move into working on feature film, where it's like the furtheration. I get to like build worlds around characters, and it's like a catwalk, except there's this beautiful team that you can like bounce ideas off of, and you're not alone, and you're kind of creating this entire world around a character. And it's like the same thing as the idea behind a catwalk, except for instead of 10 women being the same woman, it's like one character having this whole world around them. So I'm building that now.
That's amazing. Tell me about sort of like your day-to-day life. So you obviously wake up, and then how do you approach work?
Yeah, well, I mean, the day-to-day life thing is quite interesting for someone who's freelance and someone who owns their own brand in their own company, and you're kind of at the top of the pyramid, so you kind of have to motivate yourself, and you have to make your own meetings. And it's really easy, like when you don't have the pressure of someone else, you have to completely self-motivate yourself. So you have to stick to your plans. If you're going to wake up at 10 and you're going to go to two meetings, and then you're going to have your lunch, and then you're going to go meet with your directors and your brand consultants, you have to do all those things just like a normal person. So I mean, I think my everyday life is like 20 meetings and constantly thinking about in between those meetings, what else could I do to actually do more? And you kind of get to a point where your family and friends are like, do you think you have enough on your plate now? Maybe you should just like slow down a bit. And you're like, no, never.
I mean, how do you get those meetings? How do you actually how do you approach people?
Well, I think like when I first started, it was a lot of luck, but also a lot of really just mingling. Mingling, I think, is the most fundamental thing for our whole creative industry. I think if you don't put yourself out there, you're never going to have any opportunities to meet new people. And the one thing, especially about London with meeting people, is it leads you into places you wouldn't really expect. It's sort of like this vortex of creativity and support. And unlike any other place I've been in, like I've been in Toronto and I've been in Berlin and I've been in, New York, it's not as supportive as London in that there's so many opportunities in London that people aren't as greedy for them. So they will just invite you to work with a big celebrity and you maybe haven't done anything like I had the luck of doing. And in other countries, it's not so much like that because people really need that work to get their income and to support themselves.
If you give us like a three, I mean, I asked it before, but like a three-step to a student, obviously a fashion student or any sort of student who's coming out. I mean, we have architecture here as well. Just to give them some advice of how how to get to pretty much where you are.
Okay, so I think like if you want sort of a three-step for someone just coming out of school, I think the first thing is to not limit yourself to the expectations of everyone around you because everyone you're coming out of a degree, maybe you're coming out of architecture, maybe you're coming out of, fashion studies, they're going to expect that you're going to do a really specific thing. And the thing about fashion and architecture and all these things is they all really bleed into each other. And I think it's amazing when there is cross studies at university where you get to study maybe textile and architecture and how they relate to building the outside cladding of a structure and things like that. And really that's how, I look at architecture and I look at what I'm doing as a continuation of architecture. And then also, you have to really just kind of, like I said, put yourself out there constantly and go to things that you wouldn't expect to go to. So go to things like that have to do with film and go to things that have to do with beauty and makeup and go to things that are, discussions and lectures that you hear about that maybe aren't necessarily related to what you studied, but you have to continue to mingle and always, if you can, try and put yourself out there at London Fashion Week because it's the opportunity that England and the UK has for like Europe is here to make, a name for yourself in styling and blogging and fashion design. That's what we're known for. We have so many famous people like Stella McCartney and, Alexander McQueen who've made their names here. So we're lucky to have them to sort of, they've blazed trails. And for people like me who are Canadian and British at the same time and, people who are Greek and British and like we can all be British and, revel in that, thankfully, because they've set it up. Is that like two? Okay, third one, I don't know. Always be nice to everyone. You never know when you're actually talking to the editor of Vogue, or you may not know someone's name and you actually just don't know their face, or you've met them on Twitter or whatever. I've seen so many people ruin amazing opportunities because they were just a little bit snarky or they were a little bit rude. And people always remember that first impression forever. You have to work for years to erase a bad first impression. But if you're just kind to people and you're, really enthusiastic, people will always remember you that way. Like, thank goodness when I first started out, I had a lot of energy and I had less on my plate because people always remember that I'm just constantly smiling and energetic. So I'm lucky that I set that down when I first started.